Hi, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to my studio. Today, I would like to talk about the TONEX plugin, specifically the capturing abilities of it. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I would like to show you how to capture your plugin chain. Maybe combined signals, maybe just a simple amp simulation. And the reason I want to do this is because, first I have to explain, a few years ago I was on the road. I was touring the East Coast with Gus G. I was playing bass and singing for Gus G, and I was playing bass for Vinny Moore. By the time I got to the rehearsals, I realized the amp they provided for me is an absolute piece of garbage, and it's not going to be any fun. The thing started farting by the time I turned it up to like 9 o'clock. It was already just over, and I had no fun with that. So after that tour, I said never again. Then I started experimenting by using my laptop that I always had with me anyway, a little interface. I was using Cubase and some plugin stuff. It worked fine, but there was, definitely like 25 milliseconds of latency that got to be annoying after a while. Then I started using the Gig Performer plugin player software. That was better, absolutely better. I had it down to 4 or 5 milliseconds or even less at some points. Is pretty cool. And I was also able to combine like a direct signal with an amp and do some neat phase tricks, and it worked out pretty well. But I always wanted to have something like the Kemper, and I was thinking about getting the Neural DSP. I think it's called the Quad, the little pedal board with lots of buttons on it that also captures sounds, profile sounds like the Kemper. Because it was more modern, the Kemper was definitely old. What I don't like about the Kemper is that it's old. Old technology will die out. There's no way around it. And I also thought it was just way too expensive, to be honest. And it's too big. It's too big for me, to be honest. Well, at the end of last year, 2022, when the plugin came out, the TONEX plugin, I was really excited about it, got it right away. And when the pedal came out, the hardware, this thing here, I bought it immediately. And I was so excited to get to use it because this is exactly what I was looking for. And it turns out for that money, you can't lose. It's just really, really that good. Now, the thing is, I was doing a mix, and in this case, bass guitar was being laid out in 3 sounds. It was a direct sound, DI, and a clean amp, and a distorted amp. And it was all plugins, no real amps at all. But my client really liked the sound, and he would really like to take it with him, take it home, maybe to use in his system. He's got TONEX as well, or you can use TONEX CS. And he said, wouldn't it be great if you could just use that live, exactly that setup? And I first thought, well, I don't know if I want to, but yes, it is possible. It must be possible. I know I can capture from plugins. I've done it before, but I use like my main computer as my amp setup and my second computer as my capturing computer. And this works well. It works very, very well. But I didn't try doing really complex stuff. I just captured some plugins. And then he asked, well, is it possible to do this on one computer? And I thought, well, yeah, I guess so. I tried lots of trials and errors, and things worked or didn't work at first, rather, until I realized the easiest way to go about this is probably just by patching hard in and out from outputs to inputs. And that's exactly what I did, and I got it to work. So now I'm going to share this whole process with you, and I hope you'll see how useful this can be sometimes. I have a session here, and let's say I have made some kind of setup for, in this case, my bass guitar that I really, really like, and I want to get it into my TONEX pedal or just use it as a plugin eventually at some point in time. I have only one computer, and I want to capture it all, right? So here's my signal path. I've got a bass DI that's being manipulated in a few ways. It's irrelevant at the moment. I've got a clean amp sound that's making a bit more gut and body. And then I have a very distorted sound. And once again, the 3 sounds are irrelevant. It's just the point that these 3 sounds are coming together in this one mono bus to create and I want to get that now into TONEX. So now I've got my mixing board open so you can see what's happening in this respect. These 3 red faders are my inputs, 3 inputs that I'll be using. Number 1 is called audition, and it's exactly for that, so I can audition the sound. Number 2 is called VM to input, and this is receiving the virtual amp from the DAW that will be sent into TONEX to be captured. I don't even really need it here. It's just on so I can see it, basically. It's a bit of reassurance. And now the third input is the input for profiling. And this is the one I need to switch to, basically, when we actually do the process of capturing. And the reason being is you cannot share the inputs on 2 apps. At least I don't know another way to do it. So this is a very simple way that works for me. So now I got to find a way to get my amp sound into TONEX. And it's quite simple, actually. I have a send that I have on my bus sum that's summing these 3 signals together here. And it is physically going to go out of output 7, which is connected to my analog input 2. So analog output 7 is going hard patched with a short cable directly into analog 2. So I have to activate this. And when I activate it, you will see here in this channel, this is another physical output that it's coming out and it's going out to that output. And I can also see here that mono input 2 is receiving that signal as expected. So the only thing left to do is to start up TONEX. And that's how TONEX looked when you start it up. Need to mention this is the TONEX standalone app, not the plugin, right? You need to open the standalone app. Then you go to Modeler. If you've never done this before, I'll try to walk it through simply, but I don't want to get too much into detail because it's quite boring, actually. Then you have to choose your instrument selection. Now, this is for me a big deal because I've done so many tests. And I've actually reached out to Amplitude once in an email asking if maybe I was doing something wrong, because what it comes down to is I've really tried a lot and I like distorted bass sounds. I've always been into very heavy, mean, gritty bass sounds. And every time I tried to capture in bass, it just didn't always sound right until I discovered with the high gain sounds, if I go to guitar, click next, then you have these tone model types that you can select, your amp cab, complex rigs, stomp box, and amp only, and stomp and amp, whatever. I'm always choosing stomp for a couple of reasons. First of all, when you capture an amp and cab or complex rig, it gives you the possibility to later turn off the speaker so you can exchange it with another one, or the amp, same thing. I don't want this. I want nothing to go wrong. And I'm also convinced, and this is highly, highly debatable, I am convinced it sounds better. Okay. I think I've tried it in amp mode too, and it sounded equally good. So that might be an option too, if you want to play around with it. Anyway, I'm choosing Stomp Box. Also because the simplicity is there, nothing can go wrong. I've got a few parameters that I might or might not need, which I won't. And not much can go wrong from there. So next. This is the page where you set up all your audio connections. And depending on what you have, this can get a little bit tricky. Now, to make my videos, I'm using a second system. It might be a good idea to point out now that usually when I do this kind of capturing from a DAW, like a plugin setup or routing setup, I'm doing it with 2 computers because I just find it easier. I'm considering one computer to be the amp and the other computer is simply capturing. Then everything just makes total sense and you don't need all these weird connections either. But it works this way too. And because I have this very old sound card from Motu that apparently one of these softwares, well, it's actually this software, that does not like to take the hierarchy of the channel list in the literal way it was meant to be. In other words, if I open my inputs and outputs here in Cubase, I can see, for example, how my sound card is set up. Starts with 2 inputs, microphone, instrument, and then I have 8 analog, 2 reverb sends or receives here, returns, digital outputs, 8 add outputs, okay? That's a lot of outputs. It's 30 outputs, okay? This software, TONEX, only recognizes my 30 outputs from 1 to 30. So what does that mean? Well, I'm monitoring, for example, through my digital outputs, SPDIF, which is here. Of course, if you count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, right? So I always have to keep that in mind. So 13, 14 are my digital outputs. So this is where it gets a little bit hairy. I got to plug in my guitar to the input. It is plugged into input 1 here. You see it there. I have to choose input 3 because mic 1, mic 2, analog 1 is input 3. It's weird, but that's the way it is. So now it's going to receive the virtual amp, hard patch into input 2. Again, input 4 here because mic, input 1, input 2. I need to send my instrument signal to the amp, which is my DAW, to be captured. Okay, I got a little bit ahead of myself. I forgot to point out the last patch that we have to do. If you remember, in Cubase, I had the 3 inputs, and the third mono input was our capture input. Okay, that is, we need to take the signal from the amp, which is, in this case, Cubase, to put it into TONEX. And that is the physical analog input 3. So to do that, I have to go from analog output, whatever, in this case, 8. I'm taking 8 and I'm setting it back into Cubase. It says 10 here because of our hierarchy issue, but that's actually analog output 8 going back to Cubase. And now all we have to do is hit next. And then we check our input gain. And we have enough level. It says raise it, but it's not necessary. And next again, we click next, check your levels, and now we can listen to the sound we're making. I have to go back here to Cubase, and I'm just going to turn off my stereo output so I don't hear everything twice, because that will happen, unfortunately. And we see I have an okay signal. They say I could probably take it down a bit. If I wanted to, I'd take it down here, just a tiny bit. Okay, whatever it is. Now, the next thing you should do is make sure you're getting signal to this. And I would just suggest you choose some signal from this and click on play. And we don't hear anything. But you notice over here, my mono input 3 is showing that something's going on. Yes. And that's because of the sharing inputs problem that I mentioned before. So I'm going to go here to my 3 inputs, my 3 signals that are being combined. And I am going to choose that input. Okay, it's all there. It's doing what it should do. The only thing left to do is click on next. So this is the first capturing process. It sends a lot of noises and tones through it, and I guess assesses whatever needs to be done, the dynamics to whatever. And it's about a 5-minute long process, and it's nice and boring, and I won't bore you with it, but I'll show you the beginning process. Okay, the first part is done. And now we move on by clicking on next. Then we have this accuracy level, fast, default, advanced. Apparently, the slower, the better. I have tried fast. It's fine. Default is also fine. I really don't hear a big difference. Advanced, I've done a few times. And for me, I don't hear the difference that it's worth waiting like 3 or 4 hours. It takes a long time. It's apparently dependent on the GPU power of your computer. I'm using a 2020 i9 MacBook Pro, and apparently it doesn't have that much power, but it does have more power than my other computer because my other computer doesn't even have a real graphic card inside. But what it comes down to is the fast mode takes about 10 minutes, the default mode about 20 minutes, and the advanced I've tried only a couple times, and I went home, went to bed, so I really don't know how long it took. So I'm going to stick to fast for now because I just want to show the process. And if it sounds a little bit better in default, well, great. We click on next, start fast training, and we wait. Like I said, this is going to be a 10-minute process. I will not, of course, bore you with it. We'll let it get started, and I'll go grab a coffee. So it's finished, and we click next. It asks you to check again if your inputs and outputs are right, and then we click on next. Now here's a little bit of a issue. Now we're going to compare our captured model with the real thing. However, for whatever reason, I can't figure it out. With all the capturing possibilities I have in the computer and all these signals and stuff I can capture, for some reason I cannot capture the modeled tone, but I can capture the real rig when we're comparing. But it doesn't matter. I can show it in Cubase how it sounds comparatively. But first, we'll just make sure that everything is working as it should. It shows here our live input, and this is the amp we've captured compared to our real rig. What's definitely way cooler is I have latency here. It's got to be, a good 30, 40 milliseconds delay, probably more. And once it's captured, it's gone. Now we can compare in Cubase what these two sound like. But first, I have to save it and give it a name. Again, I've chosen to do this as a pedal. I'm going to use that. It looks fine to me. Let's give it a name. And we save it and go to player. And we see it here. Testing plugin capture. Let me give it a little star so it's easier to find. So it's in there. Let's go back to Cubase and see what it sounds like. I have made a track where I've inserted the TONEX and I've called up the preset that we just made. So one of the first things I'm going to have to do is go back to my original input setting, and that was Audition, model input 1. I've already got that on tone capture. Let me turn my level back up. Might be a good idea. Now this was our amp. Our real amp, so to say. And now this is our capture. The beauty of this is that it, and I don't know how this works, I'm assuming that in the capture process, it aligns the phase and just deletes any kind of pre-delay or latency that was there. And we have a latency-free sound. It's just fantastic. All right, there you have it. Pretty simple process when you really think about it. Besides all that weird hierarchy of input naming, I'm going to try something next. And I think what I'd like to try is, what would it be like actually trying to capture some kind of cool hardware device? Maybe like a, I don't know, tape machine? I don't know. I'm just playing around. We'll see. You guys take care. Thanks a lot for watching. See you again real soon.